Now, this is the second in a series of videos I'm trying to use to show the different ways that I've designed up motorcycle and other for model airplanes also paintwork. In the first video in the series, I tried to show the 101 way that I've done it using children's ink markers that are about $1. Now in this, the second video in the series, I want to show a little bit more sophisticated, a little bit more labor-intensive way of doing it. Still something that should be relatively easy to do for most people and very inexpensive. Now our ultimate goal at the end of this series of videos is I would like to have some concept drawings similar to the ones Chip Foose and the ones they have on Bitchin' Rides. I'd like to have a concept of what I want to have, and what I'm looking to do is put a similar paint job to this from the 70s and 80s onto a more modern bike. And when it's done, it looks very easy. When it's all buffed out and polished out, you look at it and you say, oh, that was easy. Yeah, but it really is a lot more difficult to get it right on the first shot. And that's the other goal of this videos. And believe me when I tell you, when you do a one-off of any kind of video where it's you have the only one with that paint job and it's wrong, it jumps right out at you. So without spending any more time out here in the tundra, I want to get down to the drawing table and I want to show you this is actually the second, actually a little bit more sophisticated than what we did on the first one, and some of the do's and don'ts that I've learned the hard way. I've learned everything the hard way. Now just to back up a little bit and to show one of the things that I've tried to do is use ordinary, these are just copies made on a cheesy printer that I have of a picture. It could be any picture, side view, front view, whatever. And what I've tried to do is allow this to be a way I can work on my vision of what the paint job should look like without having to make it too complicated or expensive. Now almost all of the things we're doing follow some simple basic rules, which I tried to cover on the first video, but on the second one it's a little more complicated, but these are all basically rules of engagement. So here's what we do. We start with a picture, it's the front view of the motorcycle. And I look at the picture and say, what would I like to change? What would I like to modify? Well, this bike looks pretty wide relative to how high it is. Now I wanted to explain this and show it because this is a critical part of designing up a paint job. Let's make this really simple. This is the bike we're working on, and of course the bike of any bike. By looking at the picture, yeah, it really is wide in the front. It would be nice now, because the reason I'm saying this is I go back to the days of TZ Yamahas where the bikes were nice and narrow, and I love that narrow look. I always try to make a bike look narrower than it really is. Now, one of the general rules, and if you've ever watched this show Brain Games on television, you know that it's about optical illusions and how you trick your brain. Anytime you paint, I call this a racing stripe down anything, it makes it look a lot narrower. It really isn't any narrower, it just looks narrower. So that's one of the things I always like to use to my advantage. When I have something that's too wide or looks too wide, a racing stripe always makes it look a lot thinner. And by the way, these same rules of engagement apply to anything. When you're painting a house, a boat, a guitar, when you're trying to thin things out, a stripe always works. And when I go out to the tundra later, I'll explain. I've basically used painting a racing stripe on a lot of things just to make them look thinner. And that's really part of designing up a paint job. Now, if you did see the first of the videos, you know these are about $1. They come from the dollar store. How can they be anything but $1? But the point that I was making is, let's pretend you wanted to try to make this, you want to use this, you want to see how it's going to look yellow. Now, this is the limitation. This is why I made the first video, and that's a very simple way to do it. And now I'm going to show a little more sophisticated way of doing it. The original way we did it, you want to make this, you want to see what the motorcycle is going to look like yellow. Well, you get out your yellow marker and you can do the tail section and yeah, and whatever. Whatever is in your mind to want to try to do. Now, I want to do this. Sometimes it takes a little bit of thought going into it before you realize, we've reached a point where we can't go any further, and which is where we are right now. Now, even if I do this, what I realize right now, I'm at the point where I need to go to the next level on this, because the crayons or these markers, they don't really do what I want to do. I want it to be this color, but it's not really that color because the photo is grayed out. And I can't go over the gray parts and get the color that I'm looking for. So what I have to do at this point, I have to go to what I call the next level, is to use paint. Now, if I want to see what a different color is going to look like, of course, I have the paint, and here's the whole thing. I can't get this color to come out with a marker. So if I do this and I just lay this out, and it doesn't have to be a piece of artwork at this point. I'm just looking for, how's this going to look? Because now what this allows me to do is I haven't gotten any more sophisticated. I'm still using the ordinary printer, ordinary paper. I have no special anything, and I'd have to have the paint to paint the motorcycle anyway. And a paintbrush that probably is $1 or $2. Although what I do is I borrow Karen's old ones after she wears them out doing her stuff. And I'm only going to do this. This is not to make a whole drawing, but just to show what will happen is this allows me to see how this is going to look. Usually you need 2 colors. A painted thing and one done with ink markers, the painted one is a lot more defined. But now you don't see the shadows. You don't see the creases and the shadows. So you've traded one part for the other. Again, this is just a demonstration. You realize all of these ways of doing things, these very inexpensive things, have limitations. The limitation of the markers is you can't really get the color right. The limitation of the paint, you don't see any of the basic shading of it. But both of these ways, the advantage of doing these is you don't really need any money at all. You need a black and white printer and a picture of your motorcycle, a couple of pictures, and you're good to go. But this, being able to look at 2 different things is side by side at the same time is one of the advantages of doing it this way. Now, the other part of this that makes this, I think, both fun, inexpensive, and I can envision certain things. Now, I always wanted to see, for instance, I wanted to reverse the coloring on the ladders and say, we're doing a custom one-off paint job. Would I like it better white? Would I like it better black? How do I can compare side by side. Now, I'm going to share another little trick that I learned many, many years ago. When I'm making these type of things, very, very difficult to paint unless you're Vince or you're really a good artist. But there's a way to do it. And I found that if I take this double striping tape, and you can see there's a thin stripe and a thick stripe, I can peel out the thin stripe. I can lay stripes all over the motorcycle, every different way, and come up with, it looks pretty professional. Not that professional. But anyway, as opposed to if you do it with a pencil or with a pen or whatever. But these drawings just make it very easy to work on what your concept, what your vision of the thing is going to be. Now, what I always have a lot of fun, and most of the time I'm doing this, it's late at night anyway, and I have a bunch of these black and white pictures, and I can lay out my badging, and many times John Pothier and I have discussed where to put the decals, how big to make them, how to make the lettering, and we've gotten into that. And here's the biggest thing, though. It allows me to fantasize what this is going to look like. Not an exact like a photograph would be, but pretty close. And each time I make these drawings more and more sophisticated, I find out I get more and more ideas. I'm looking on a computer. I'm looking at all of the things around me that how would I like this to look? And it just makes, it's like brain exercise. And every once in a while you stumble on something that you really like. Now this is a lesson I learned in the world of model planes. I call it a critical lesson. It's so important. You have two different colors and you want to accent that. And the way to accent it, and of course I'm using the striping tape, maybe a little awkward doing this here, but I think you'll see what I mean real quick. If you have Chip Foose type of talent, or Vince, or any of the people that we know that are George Venturini, professional artists, you can do this with a pen and paper. But if you're limited, well, now what I was trying to show is how different it looks with that thin white stripe, and that thin white stripe changes everything. Now again, just to show what I think is critical, I had envisioned this paintwork with the two colors. Karen okayed the colors, and I pictured it with the stripe and without the stripe. And needless to say, the stripe changed everything. On the RD, it's the same thing, same exact thing. I want that tank, in reality, is kind of a chubby, fat tank. By painting a stripe down the middle, it got a little thinner this way, and then by painting a stripe on the top, it got thinner that way, and it made it, I think, a much more attractive motorcycle. It's the same trick where earlier in this video I showed what I thought was an important thing. Narrowing things down. A stock RD fender is kind of a clunky, chunky thing. Well, that makes it look a little bit, to me, more attractive. And of course, it's all in the eye of the beholder anyway. Now here's the ultimate, really wide, fat tank. And we just recently added the little piece up by the risers. But changed the whole look of the tank in one stripe. And the white banding, the white edge, super important. And when we did the paint job on the West Coulee, having a stripe even on the tail section just made, I think, made this a very unique paint job, very unusual, and yet it has the flavor of the West Coulee bikes that came before it. So now when we actually do get to paint this, and that's still up in the clouds for a lot of reasons, I can see one of the things I'll try to do is incorporate a stripe down the tank, because this, again, this is a big wide gas tank. A big wide tail section, a stripe will narrow that out, make it look longer. And the fender, of course, is, like many sport bikes, relatively wide, having that stripe go right down the whole motorcycle. I think that's going to add a lot to it. And in the past, when I've done that, I've always been happy with the stripe down the middle of the fender. Well, here you go, right here. It always has something that appeals to me. So now you can see the second and the first part. This was the second part, but of course the third part, we need to use a computer, and we're going to use some sophisticated art supplies to do that. And I'm going to try to do my best Chip Foose imitation. The only problem is I'm going to be working on that probably for another week or so with John Pothier, who's helping me with the computer part of it, and I'm going to try to show how you can do some of these with computer generated photos. That's coming on the next video. So I hope you enjoyed this video and got some ideas of just, you know, this is not real difficult, but it certainly gives you some food for thought. And to be really honest, this is what usually happens on these type of projects. I start off with a project, and in my mind I have a certain vision. And then halfway through I say, maybe I could do it, I could do it that way, I could do it this way. Well, after speaking to several people about this project, now we just got finished with the almost all of the Evil Twin project. Turned out great. The thought came to me, this could be Evil Twin 2. Now, what it would require is, and here's the hard part, I'd need to get another tail section, another set of fairings, and another upper fairing. These parts are all available, roughly $700. The only part that I don't have is a fuel tank. So maybe in the near future I'll start, because I basically have a long time to be looking for this. I'm not in any rush. It's a future project. The part of this, so what I could have is, with a whole new set of bodywork, I can have an Evil Twin FZR. And the only part I don't have, now maybe Mark Morgan has an FZR tank. I still have to look and see if the spare 750 tank I have fits on here, among other things. That's what makes this an interesting project. And every time I sketch or play around with these colored pencils, my ideas always evolve, and that's why I always like to do this one step at a time. I don't like to just go to the paint store, see a color I like, and say, yeah, let's paint the house. Well, I like to see it on a print, think about it a little while. We will be thinking about this for a while, believe me. Now this is what's going to happen in the near future, and I haven't even started making the video yet. It'll be the third of this series. What happened, Karen was at a Tricky Tray and she won this set of artist supplies, and his crayons and his what looks like pastels and brushes and colored pencils, and I don't even know what some of this stuff is. Maybe I could get Vince to come over to the house and do this with me or whatever. I'll bring it to his house. Anyway, it'll be fun, because what I'm going to try to do is in the next week or so, or whatever amount of time. See, I'm not in a rush to do this. I really have to make other decisions about the body work, but I want to have the concept of it down pat. But to make a long story short here, what happened is, John Pothia, who's been working with me on this project, he came up with this. We haven't finished it yet, but what it is, he bleached out all the red, took out the background, and we're going to make a larger version of this, so that when I work with these colors, and pretty much, I guess, with no point even doing a demo, we're going to do this on the next video, but we'll have this in a bigger size with just a hint of where these body lines are, and be able to use these. And now I don't have any illusions about being Chip Foose. What I do know is I'll learn something, and it's the learning to me that always is the most fun of all. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and all I can say is thanks for watching.